Chapter 6.
Doc, where?
Traveler looked around.
Obviously a translation matrix glitch.
Jade smiled, staring at the dragon as it flew off and faded into the distance.
Land of fiction?
Yes?
Traveler consulted his watch.
During the attack, a British developed a nasty, huge energy leak. She was in crisis. Had two options: create a resurrective loop, or dive into the white void.
Jade turned back to him.
Yeah, you're gonna have to clarify.
Traveler stopped petting the baby unicorn.
A recursive loop is bad news. It means the only safe place Purge could find materialize in was herself. She would have materialized on her own bridge.
Doesn't sound like news that bad.
Jade shrugged. Traveler's eyes widened.
You have no idea. We would have been stuck inside Purge for eternity. She would have never been able to leave from inside herself. And that's the good side of it.
Jade focused on him, hands on her hips.
What's the not good side of it?
A time ram.
Traveler sighed. Before Jade could ask, Traveler just held up a finger and said,
Complete annihilation. Again, bad news.
Jade turned her gaze from him and back to the gorgeous medieval vista before her.
So we came here instead?
Exactly. I took us into the white void.
Traveler shrugged.
Not my first choice, but the only thing we could do, except, die.
So we're in a white void?
Jade asked. Traveler nodded.
What the hell is a white void?
Technically speaking, we're outside normal time and space itself. This place
Traveler held his arms out.
Is a pocket of unreality. We are in an anti-universe.
Upon hearing this, Jade found herself very panicky.
You can get us back, right?
Last time she heard news like this, it meant she was going to miss band practice. Oh, and that, for the time being, she was stranded and unable to go home. Traveler seemed to intuit what she was feeling and placed his hands on her shoulders.
Yes, I can get us back. Just give me a bit of time,
he urged reassuringly.
How much time?
Traveler looked up at the sky, calculating.
Good question. See, Purge is powered by the Eye of Harmony.
The black hole thing?
Jade interjected.
Yes, the black hole thing. Problem is, in the white void, the anti-universe, she is cut off from her main power source.
Jade didn't feel particularly positive.
Then how in the duck are you going to get us back?
Calm down.
Traveler again started tinkering with his watch.
Purge can also draw power from the universe. Even an anti-universe like this will do in a pinch. She'll be healed up and patched in about 3...
He held his watch to his ear.
Years?
No!
Jade screamed. Traveler seemed very startled at this.
Calm down. Universal translation makes it screwed up, remember? 3 days, Jade. 3 days.
Jade sighed and composed herself.
And why do you keep shouting Doch as if it's a curse word?
Traveler slapped his forehead.
Universal translation matrix screwed up, remember?
Jade smiled. She felt much more optimistic about hanging out here with unicorns and dragons for 3 days than for 3 years. Traveler sighed and wearily grinned.
Jade, do you feel like checking out the local scenery?
Well, we have 3 days to kill. Why not?
He typed a few things on his watch, and it let out a pleasant yet high-pitched tone.
What was...
Before Jade could ask, suddenly a huge, full-grown, beautiful male unicorn emerged from the woods behind them. It was gray, almost silver, muscular, and just gigantic. It stepped toward them, and Jade found herself backing up instinctively.
Relax,
Traveler said.
I speak unicorn.
The unicorn knelt down on its front 2 legs, as if bowing. No, Jade thought. It's an invitation. Traveler hoisted himself up on the mammoth unicorn effortlessly. For someone over a century old, he was very spry. He smiled gently and held out his hand for Jade. Despite herself, she found that she was grinning, and leaped upon the unicorn with the stranger in white. The unicorn righted itself. Traveler typed several complicated things into his watch, and let out a series of tones, beautiful and melodic. The unicorn nodded, and began to trot away from Purge and their crash site.
Where are we going?
Jade asked, wrapping her arms around Traveler's waist. He kept looking ahead as he answered.
Camelot.
They rode for a couple of hours up the side of a mountain. When they reached the summit, Jade could view the entire countryside for miles. Indeed, directly below them in the valley was a city. It looked like a city. A medieval city, very large and densely populated and bustling. There was a main castle, several buildings, and many, many people. The entire area was surrounded by a moat. It looked exactly like it was out of a fairy tale.
So, this is Camelot.
The traveler held out his hand, motioning.
I told Wistia to take us to the nearest city. I figured if we're here for 3 days, we could get a couple of rooms at an inn.
Jade shielded her eyes from the sun, peering at Camelot.
I presume Wisteria is our unicorn friend?
The unicorn nodded its head up and down and stomped the ground twice. She supposed that was yes, because Traveler never answered her. The trip down to Camelot went by quickly, and Wisteria knelt down to let them off. Traveler's watch let out several musical tones, and Wisteria nodded, then set off at a fast run. Jade watched the magnificent mythical beast disappear in the distance. Traveler crooked his arm out to Jade.
Shall we, milady?
No one had ever done that for her before. Very old-fashioned. Jade took his arm, and they made their way through the bazaar, the marketplace, and the outer area beyond the moat. Peddlers, mercenaries, tradesmen, villagers were all going about their business outside of the main gate, some staring at what they deemed to be very outlandish clothing. Traveler stopped at a grocery stand and looked at the proprietor.
Can I get an apple, please?
Holsai Ustfudig?
Came the fat, sweaty, dirty man's reply.
I hate Old English.
Traveler rolled his eyes as he pressed something on his watch.
Let's try that again.
He murmured.
Can I get an apple?
Fresh daily bread?
The proprietor answered. Traveler slowly shook his head.
No, an apple.
The fat man nodded and tossed the time traveler a large green apple and said,
Tiny pence.
Traveler gave the apple to Jade and handed the proprietor nothing. Strange. He made the motion of putting something in the fat guy's hand, and the fat guy seemed happy, even looking at his hand, at literally nothing.
Where can we rest for a few days?
Traveler asked. The proprietor pointed at the huge gate beyond the moat.
The Braxtonberry. Big Inn. Right across the castle. Good breakfast.
He was still talking as Traveler walked away, taking Jade with him. Jade took a big bite of the apple. It was absolutely delicious. She offered it to the Traveler.
No, thank you.
He said,
I'm not big on the whole eating thing.
She thought about it and realized that she hadn't seen him eat, or drink, or sleep, or go use the restroom, or shower, or any of those normal human things. Although she hadn't known Traveler for very long, she figured he would have to do at least one of those things at some point. Yet, no, he hadn't.
You don't like to eat?
Traveler put his hands in his pocket as she took another tasty bite.
I tried it once. Too much work.
You don't have to eat, like, at all?
Jade was generally taken aback. She liked food. She liked eating. She took another juicy munch. They continued to make their way to the main gate.
Humans run hot.
Traveler said.
They burn through their life rather quickly. My temperature is somewhere around 65 degrees.
You should be dead.
Yours is probably around 99.
Traveler ignored her interruption.
I'm not human. Not sure if you've really grasped that. I don't have to sleep. I don't have to eat or drink. I'm not as sensitive to cold or heat. I don't age as quickly.
Jade wiped her mouth.
You're trying to impress me?
You were impressed a long time ago,
Traveler stated.
I'm just filling in some details for you.
The main gate was towering and made of very thick oak, as one would expect to see in a medieval castle courtyard. 2 guards stood at attention, their pikes crossed in front of the threshold. As Traveler and Jade approached, the guards stiffened up.
Halt! Identify yourself!
One of them demanded. Traveler shook his head.
No.
The 2 guards pointed their weapons at him as he finished.
Please.
Traveler pointed his watch at them and blasted them with an electrical azure stream of light Jade had seen several times. She jumped. Then she realized they were frozen, like statues.
Whoa!
I know.
Traveler grinned like an idiot, pushed past the guards, opening the small through door on the bottom of the huge gate.
Did you? Are they?
Fine.
Traveler explained.
I just froze them for a minute. I don't much feel like playing games. I just want to get you a room, then see if I can't find some liquid mercury or artron energy.
Is that something they normally stock up on in Camelot?
Jade asked with that trademark sarcasm.
You are such a smartass.
They entered into the courtyard of the castle. It was what anyone reading a fairy tale would imagine the glorious Camelot to look like. Splendor, wealth, harmony. The locals, whether a knight or a knave, or a servant or a merchant, all were going through their routines and all seemed happy with their lives. Traveler peered around everywhere, searching for something. He stopped, closed his eyes, and took a sniff in the air. He was analyzing the scent of something. Opening his eyes, he pointed and said,
That way!
Jade followed him into the tavern, which was dark and smelled like old beer and old farts. Lovely. She stopped at the fireplace and watched Traveler walk up to the owner, who stood behind the main bar. They conversed for a moment as Jade glanced around briefly. Lots of guys in this place. Actually, there were only guys in this place. Were staring at her. One guy licked his lips. She turned away quickly. Ugh, gross. Jade continued to stare into the fire for a moment. Transfixed, pulled from her reverie, she suddenly heard a loud crashing. She turned to see several palace guards grabbing and shoving Traveler. They had a difficult time. He struggled. She heard herself yelling at them. For what seemed like an eternity, these guards just could not seem to grapple him completely. Traveler picked one of them up, remarkably easily, and flung him across the room. At that point, Jade ran toward him, but was apprehended by a palace guard. He pinned her arms behind her back and held a knife to her throat. Jade's mind screamed.
Oh my God! Oh my God! They're going to kill me!
Stranger!
The guard shouted at Traveler, poking the tip of the blade into her neck and releasing a trickle of blood. Traveler immediately stopped, held up his hands. The guards, 8 of them, surrounded him now, tossed him on the dingy tavern floor. Jade watched helplessly, as for 5 solid minutes the guards beat Traveler mercilessly, stomping on him and repeatedly kicking him in the face and ribs. She was screaming, louder than she had ever screamed before. She was horrified. They were going to kill him. But eventually stopped, picking him up and placing his hands behind his back as they shackled him. Traveler looked at Jade, and she knew he was making sure she was all right. Aside from a small nick in her neck and being terrified, she was okay. Oddly enough, so was Traveler. She expected blood, black eyes. Hell, the way one of the guards was stomping on his face, she was expecting severe disfigurement. She expected his face to be caved in. Not a scratch on him. Jade was very, very taken aback by this. Traveler just let out a sigh. The captain of the guard entered from the main doorway behind Jade and walked to the Traveler.
Stranger, you've been witnessing the glory of Camelot performing acts of dark magic. You will be taken to the court of the great king for sentencing to death.
Purge it into purge it day.
Traveler grimaced. Jade wanted to smile at the malfunction of the universal translation matrix. But she didn't find this amusing. She was scared. It seemed to take forever for the guards to lead them to a castle and up endless stairways. They eventually entered a huge, glorious, decorated chamber. Statues of knights stood motionless along the walls. Royal banners hung from the great rafters overhead. They were led along a great red rug that led to 2 royal thrones. A king sat in one of them. The king. King Arthur. He was an old man, with a trim white beard. And he was hot. Like, really, really attractive. For an old guy, Jade thought. But he had the same tired, ancient look in his eyes that Traveler had.
Stranger!
King Arthur's voice boomed.
Explain yourself. Why are you here? What have you to say of these charges brought against you and your maid?
Now hold on a minute.
Jade shouted.
I'm not his.
Silence, woman!
The king shouted.
I wasn't speaking to you.
He turned his attention back to the stranger in white. Traveler composed himself and looked at the king.
I kidnapped her. Against her will.
Traveler spoke softly.
Please, don't harm her. I'm willing to take whatever justice must be met here. Just don't harm her.
King Arthur rubbed his beard, contemplating. He leaned back in his throne and seemed to soften a bit.
My entire life, I have lived by a code. I am a just man. I am a fair man.
He leaned forward.
I have never seen a practitioner of the dark arts willing to sacrifice himself for someone else.
There was a heavy silence as everyone in the room stared at the king intently, watching him think.
Stranger, if you can provide some explanation to your doings, perhaps we can discuss a leniency to your sentence.
The king actually seemed hopeful.
No man should ever condemn another man to death lightly.
Traveler nodded.
I would offer explanation, Your Majesty, if I thought it would make sense to you. I'm afraid.
The king stiffened.
You think me a fool? You insult my intelligence, sir.
No.
Traveler offered.
I don't think you a fool. It's just my dark arts, as you call it, cannot be easily explained, and my reasons for being here.
He lowered his head.
I'm afraid I can't divulge.
The king nodded, disappointed and saddened. He took a deep breath and let it out very slowly.
Then,
King Arthur said softly,
I condemn you to die by crossbows, in accordance to the laws of Camelot and the laws of the Round.
No, no!
Jade screamed. King Arthur generally seemed pained by stating this decree, and finished in a voice barely above a whisper.
To be carried out immediately.
Before Jade knew what was happening, the guards were dragging her and Traveler back out of the castle, into the courtyard. They chained Traveler to a post in the center of the square, in heavy steel shackles. Knights, servants, other guards, and handmaidens all gathered in a large crowd to see the spectacle. Jade kept trying to wrench herself free from the guards, tried to release herself to help him. To no avail. As a precaution, the captain of the guard pinned Traveler to the post with several feet of thick iron chain. He appeared absolutely immobile, trapped, helpless. Jade screamed, then screamed and screamed. 10 palace guards lined up in profile in front of the Traveler, and notched arrow bolts on their crossbows. They positioned themselves with their weapons ready for the stranger in white. The captain of the guard raised one fist in the air.
Prepare!
He shouted. The execution squad became rigid, took aim. Jade was crying and screaming so loud that her entire body shook. With terror-soaked eyes, she stared at the Traveler. He was calm. He raised his head and looked her directly in the eyes. The captain of the guard lowered his fist.
Execute!
Then Jade noticed something very peculiar. Traveler winked at her.